When we moved into Willow Creek Estates, we thought it was the fresh start our family desperately needed. The neighborhood looked like something out of a magazine. Freshly trimmed hedges, pastel-colored homes with white fences, and smiling faces waving from porches. It was quiet, clean, and structured, everything you'd want for raising a child. For my daughter Lily, it was more than just a move. It was hope. Lily was only 9 years old, but she had already been through more pain than most adults could bear. A drunk driver had run a red light 2 years earlier, flipping our car and crushing her spine. She survived, thank God, but her life was forever changed. Confined to a wheelchair and adjusting to a new reality, she had to relearn how to find joy in the smallest things. But she was strong, resilient, and bright as sunshine on her best days. This move was for her. We wanted her to live somewhere where people wouldn't stare, where neighbors would treat her like any other child. At first, everything seemed fine. Lily loved drawing with chalk on the sidewalk, giggling as she colored in her rainbows. The neighbors smiled politely, some even waved. But then we met Karen. Karen was the HOA president. From the moment she walked up to our house with her stiff smile and clipboard, I sensed something wasn't right. She wasn't welcoming, she was inspecting. Her eyes darted from our wheelchair ramp to the garden to the position of our trash bins. "We keep things orderly around here," she said, tapping her pen. "Please be mindful of the aesthetic." It didn't feel like advice, it felt like a warning. A week later, we got our first HOA violation, unauthorized structure in front yard. It was referring to Lily's ramp. My husband called to clarify it was a required ADA-compliant installation. Karen's response? "We'll review that at the next meeting." But what really made my skin crawl was how she looked at Lily like she didn't belong. Once, as Lily played outside, Karen walked by and muttered under her breath, "Children like that should be kept indoors." I froze, unsure if I heard her correctly. Lily didn't notice. She was too busy giggling at the pink chalk heart she had just drawn. I wanted to believe she was just old-fashioned, ignorant, maybe not malicious, but deep down, I knew we had moved next to a storm hiding behind a picket fence. And that storm was just getting started. In the weeks that followed our introduction to Karen, the tension around our home began to grow thicker, subtle, at first, like a shadow just outside your line of sight. We received a second HOA notice, sidewalk obstruction. It claimed that Lily's wheelchair, when parked beside her, was blocking public access. But our driveway was wide, and she never played on the sidewalk itself, only within the safe boundaries of our own front yard. At first, we laughed it off. "She's ridiculous," my husband said, tossing the letter into the junk drawer. But I didn't laugh. I'd seen the way Karen's eyes followed Lily, not with concern, but with a cold, unsettling judgment, like Lily was ruining her perfect view of the neighborhood. The next violation came days later. This time, it was about the colorful chalk drawings Lily loved so much. Graffiti, Karen called it, in an official-looking printed notice. Sidewalks must remain clean and neutral in appearance. It was as if joy itself offended her. When my husband tried reasoning with her, Karen didn't budge. She stood in our yard, arms crossed over her green cardigan, and said, "This community has standards. We don't make exceptions for circumstances." The pause before her last word said everything. She couldn't even bring herself to say disabled child. It burned through me like acid. I wanted to fight back, to scream at her, but we were new here. We didn't want drama. We just wanted peace for Lily. So we complied. We washed off the chalk drawings and told Lily she could only play in the backyard, where no one could see her or judge her. That night, as I tucked her into bed, Lily asked me something I'll never forget. "Mama, did I do something bad? Why don't they want me outside?" I forced a smile, stroked her hair, and told her no, that she was perfect. But inside, I felt something break. Over the next few days, we tried going through proper channels. I emailed the HOA board, attaching photos, citing laws, even referencing the ADA. I asked for a meeting, but they were either too afraid of Karen's influence or too indifferent to care. One member replied vaguely, saying the board trusts Karen's discretion. Then came the moment that changed everything. Lily came inside crying one afternoon. She had tried to go outside to read, and Karen had been walking her dog. According to Lily, Karen leaned in close and hissed, "Stop making cripple noises. Go back inside." I froze. That word, cripple, it hadn't been spoken with ignorance but with venom. My husband's fists clenched when I told him. We considered going to the police then, but without proof, we feared we'd only escalate things. We installed a camera on the porch the next day. We told Lily to always stay where the camera could see her. I didn't realize it at the time, but I was preparing for something my heart already feared. That the woman next door wasn't just cruel. She was dangerous. It was supposed to be an ordinary Tuesday. The sky was clear, the air warm with a soft breeze fluttering the curtains in our living room. Lily had woken up in a cheerful mood, asking if she could go outside to color on the front porch. I hesitated for a moment. Karen had been especially hostile lately, but our new porch camera gave me some comfort. I reminded Lily to stay in its view and kissed her forehead. "I'll be back in 20 minutes, I told her, grabbing my purse. We were out of eggs and milk. Just a quick trip to the store. Lily smiled and nodded, her colored pencils already in her lap. When I pulled back into the driveway, the first thing I noticed was the silence. Lily was usually humming or giggling to herself while she played, but the porch was empty. Her sketch pad lay on the ground, pages fluttering in the wind. Her wheelchair was gone. My heart lurched. I ran toward the house, shouting her name. No answer. I checked inside, the backyard, the garage, nothing. Panic took over. I called my husband, my voice shaking, barely able to explain. Then, faintly, I heard something screaming. A child's voice. Lily's voice. It was coming from Karen's backyard. Without thinking, I sprinted across our lawns, heart pounding so loudly I could barely hear. Karen's side gate was latched, but I shoved it open with all my strength and charged into her yard. And there she was. Lily sat trembling in her wheelchair, her wrists tightly bound with red duct tape. Her mouth hung open in horror, her cheeks wet with tears. Her forearms were covered in fresh bruises. Karen stood over her, shouting like a lunatic, clutching a broomstick in one hand and waving it violently in the air. She touched my roses. Little brat thinks she can disrespect my property, she screamed, raising the broom and striking it down against the arm of the wheelchair with a loud crack. I screamed, "Stop it! What are you doing?" Karen turned to me, face red, eyes wild. "This is HOA business. Your daughter is a disturbance. This is how we discipline around here." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I pulled out my phone shaking and dialed 911. "Please, my daughter, she's disabled, she's being attacked." I sobbed into the receiver. The dispatcher's voice was calm but urgent. "Officers are on their way." Karen, completely unhinged, didn't even try to stop me. She kept shouting, pacing, ranting about rules and property lines. I knelt beside Lily, brushing her hair back, whispering to her that she was safe now, that help was coming. Lily looked up at me with wide, terrified eyes and asked, "Why does she hate me?" I had no answer. Minutes felt like hours. I wrapped my arms around her, shielding her from Karen's madness. In the distance, I finally heard its sirens, relief mixed with rage and heartbreak. I'd been gone for 20 minutes. That's all it took. And in those 20 minutes, Karen revealed the monster she truly was. The wail of sirens echoed down the street, like justice racing toward us. I didn't move from Lily's side. Her little body trembled in my arms, eyes wide and unfocused. Her wrists were still bound with red duct tape, the same tape Karen must have used without a second thought. Like tying up a child was just another line item in her rulebook. Karen stood a few feet away, now pacing in sharp, angry circles like a caged animal. Her broom lay on the grass beside her, splintered at the handle, her face flushed with rage. But there was something else now, panic. She could hear the sirens too, and she knew she had gone too far. 2 patrol cars screeched to a stop outside the gate. Door slammed. I stood up and shouted, "We're back here. She's here. Please, hurry." The officers rushed through the gate with hands hovering near their holsters. One of them froze at the sight of Lily, bruised, taped, and sobbing, and his entire expression changed. He immediately called for EMTs. Karen tried to switch masks in an instant. "She attacked my property," she shouted, pointing at Lily. "That little brat rolled into my flower bed and wouldn't stop screaming." The younger officer blinked in disbelief. "You tied up a disabled child and beat her?" Karen stiffened. She wouldn't stop rolling around. "Her mother lets her do whatever she wants. This community has rules." But it was too late. I had already handed my phone to the other officer, security footage from our porch camera. It clearly showed Karen dragging Lily down the sidewalk by her wheelchair, her face twisted with anger. It showed her slapping Lily's hands away when she resisted. It showed everything. Karen's words faltered. Her voice dropped to a nervous tremble. She was trespassing. I didn't mean to hurt her. It was a misunderstanding. The officers weren't moved. One approached Karen, pulled her arms behind her back, and read her rights as he handcuffed her. The neighbors, now gathered silently along the sidewalk, watched in stunned silence. Some gasped. No one defended her. As she was led away, Karen shrieked, "You people don't belong here anyway. You've ruined this whole neighborhood." The ambulance pulled up. Paramedics rushed to Lily, carefully cutting away the tape from her wrists. She whimpered at their touch. One of them examined the bruises and whispered something to the other. They lifted her gently onto a stretcher. I climbed in beside her, holding her hand tightly. As we drove to the hospital, the adrenaline faded and the ache set in. My baby, my brave, strong baby, had been assaulted in a place we thought was safe. And for what? For playing outside? In that moment, I realized something painful but necessary. The real danger wasn't just Karen. It was the silence of those who saw, those who suspected, and did nothing. But not anymore, because now the silence was broken. Let me know when you're ready for Chapter 5, the emotional closure and justice part of the story. Or if you'd like this story turned into a video script, audio narration, or Hindi translation. The hospital room was quiet except for the soft beeping of the monitor next to Lily's bed. She lay there curled on her side, her tiny hands wrapped in gauze. The doctors assured us that her bruises would heal within a few weeks, but the emotional scars, those were deeper. Every time someone walked past the door, her body tensed. Every loud sound made her flinch. I stayed by her side, every moment, holding her hand and reading her stories, even when her eyes stayed fixed on the ceiling. Her smile, the one that could light up the room, was missing. For now. The next morning, 2 detectives arrived at the hospital. They had reviewed the footage. They'd also spoken with neighbors, several of whom admitted they had seen Karen drag Lily into her yard but were too afraid or too unsure to act. A few apologized. Most didn't. Karen was officially charged with multiple felonies: child endangerment, unlawful restraint, and aggravated assault. We were told she had tried to plead temporary insanity, claiming she was emotionally overwhelmed by neighborhood responsibilities, but the footage spoke louder than her excuses. The judge was stern and clear. "You deliberately targeted a vulnerable child," he said during sentencing. "Your actions were hateful, unlawful, and show a dangerous lack of empathy." Karen was sentenced to 2 years in prison and barred from serving on any homeowner's board again. The news spread quickly. Local media picked up the story. For the first time, people saw Lily not just as a little girl in a wheelchair, but as a victim of something far too common: cruelty disguised as control, abuse masked by authority. But Lily, she chose not to remain a victim. 2 weeks later, she asked to go outside again. My husband and I hesitated, hearts pounding, but we said yes. We had repainted the porch ramp in bright, bold rainbow colors, the same colors she had once drawn with a chalk. The neighbors watched quietly as Lily rolled onto the porch with a fresh set of colored pencils in her lap. She looked around, lifted her chin, and began to draw again. She drew hearts, stars, clouds, her favorite things. But right in the center, she drew a giant sunflower strong, bright, and unbreakable. That's who she was now. We added a bench beside a ramp and carved a simple message into it. Kindness is louder. Since then, people stop by just to admire her art. Strangers smile. Children wave. A few even bring their own chalk and join her. Karen's house went up for sale shortly after her sentencing. It sits empty now, a shell, just like her rules, her cold stares, and her hatred. Emptied out by truth, Lily taught us all something powerful. You can try to silence a child. You can even try to break her. But you'll never erase her light.